It feels like at some point in every AFL season, people go crazy because of suspensions. Round 18 was the detonation point this year, with Charlie Cameron and Toby Bedford receiving 3-game bans for their tackles on the opposition, although both did get off, successfully appealing at the AFL Appeals Board. It puts head knocks and concussion on the radar, while still trying to keep the foundation of the sport intact. On a less serious note, dangerous tackles are not the only way to get suspended. We have already seen one strange action leading to a ban this year, but in the past, players have come up with their own unique ways to sit on the sidelines. The strangest one this season has to be James Sicily. All the way back in round 1, just a few minutes in the first quarter, the Hawthorn captain lost his cool for a split second.
Not the type of matter that steps outside the ordinary case where victim evidence is discouraged. Now, the Hawks are challenging this incident on impact. They want it downgraded from medium to low. If that happens, he will play this weekend. He'll just be fined. It's been graded intentional conduct, medium impact.
In an act we rarely ever see, while pushing over Andrew McGrath, Sicily extended out his legs and gave a little kick to McGrath on his way down. The Bombers players pointed it out and once again began a mini scuffle with Sicily. After the game, he was offered a 1-game ban, but the club did decide to challenge it at the tribunal. Luckily for him, McGrath seemed to be on his side. The Essendon vice-captain said, "After every incident, our club doctor calls us to see if there are any medical ramifications or any soreness. My report to him was that there's nothing. I've got no bruise, no nothing," McGrath told SEN on the Monday. Hopefully that stands up in the appeal if there is one. It was pretty innocuous. I didn't even realise that he put his foot into the back of me, which suggests how severe the kick was. Not very at all. With this in his favour, the Hawthorn legal team was able to successfully downgrade the charge, although Sicily was still guilty and had to pay a $2,500 fine. The success of the case was also a first for Sicily at the tribunal.
This is the first time in 14 goes that James Sicily has been successful at the
14.
tribunal. He had 13 previous guilties, either accepted or challenged and lost. He's paid to play a little bit, that's fair to say. Tonight he's still guilty, so that will add to his record, but he was successful in what he was trying to do.
You have to do something pretty serious to receive a 3-month club-induced suspension. In the 2006 off-season, the punishment was handed out to Geelong forward Steve Johnson. While back home with some friends during the Christmas period, the then 23-year-old had one of the strangest nights you have ever heard of.
One night back home there where I had a few too many, and I ended up leaving the local pub and going home, and I said to one of my mates, "I'm going home." He said, "Why don't you come back to our house and we'll play some cards or something when we get back?" And I went back to his house. I knew exactly the address, and I ended up falling asleep on the outdoor setting out the back, and it wasn't until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning that I was woken up by the police asking me what I was doing there.
He'd moved, hadn't he?
I didn't know at the time, but I hadn't been home for 6 months. And I'd gone to where he used to live, but he'd moved out, so it was unfortunate.
Now Johnson wasn't arrested or charged with anything, but only 3 years after his famous double broken ankles incident, clearly he knew his career was on the line. After being released from the local police station 3 or 4 hours later, Johnson didn't tell anybody.
If the club finds out about this, I'll be in deep trouble, so I didn't tell anyone about it, and then it was about a week or two later that a Channel 7 reporter called Neil Baum, the footy manager, and said, "We'd heard that Steve Johnson's been locked up in Wangaratta, is it true?" And I hadn't told him, so with that I was brought in front of the powers that be and also the leadership group at Geelong and given a pretty heavy punishment.
With a long suspension in front of him, Johnson said he got super fit. He even had to train with the VFL team and was essentially sent completely away from the club and had to earn the respect of his teammates. Finally, he made his return to the AFL team in round 6 of 2007. Against Richmond, it was the breakout game for the Cats, who piled on 35 goals, winning 222 to 65. Johnson in his first appearance back had 21 disposals and 2 goals, which set him up for his first All-Australian appearance. He kicked 49 total goals for the season and in just 9 months had completely turned his fortunes around. It culminated on grand final day in another destructive Geelong performance, who ended up beating Port Adelaide 163-44. Johnson won the Norm Smith medal, gathering 23 touches and kicking 4 goals. Dirty tactics aren't used like they once were, mainly because of cameras that can see literally everything on the field. But this didn't stop Hawthorn captain Ben Stratton in 2019. The medium and small defender would often have to play on the most dangerous and crafty opposition forwards. In Hawthorn's round 13 game against Essendon, his matchup was Orazio Fantasia. Throughout the night, Stratton was caught using questionable tactics. He was seen repeatedly pinching Fantasia, and in one instance, even stomped on another Essendon player.
Ben put his hand up, acknowledged that. Geez, I've been around footy a long time. Geez, that's the worst thing that's ever happened on the footy field. And I can't marry up the hysteria with what actually happened.
This photo shows the massive amount of bruises on Fantasia's arm. Stratton did do a fair bit of damage to his skin on the night. The incidents were both so strange that Stratton had to go straight to the AFL tribunal to argue his case. He pleaded guilty to serious misconduct for the pinching and pleaded guilty to stomping Sean McKernan. His legal team tried to argue for a fine but failed, and Stratton received a 2-game ban in total, 1 match for each of the incidents. All this occurred just 2 weeks after Stratton had first been put on notice for doing a similar pinching action against Brisbane's Charlie Cameron. It ended up being the first suspension in, at that point, Stratton's 181 game career. Now, teammates can scuffle and disagree at training. It's not actually that uncommon, and even recently we have seen many outbursts on the field and on the training track between teammates. But what Setanta O'Halpin did at Carlton in 2009 is something we had rarely ever seen before. In a 2009 February intra-club match, the defender at the time lined up on Cameron Cloke. Out of nowhere, this happened.
O'Halpin is hanging by a thread tonight, with the club suspending him indefinitely following an attack on teammate Cameron Cloke. In some of the uglier scenes captured at an intra-club match, O'Halpin punched and kicked Cloke while he was lying on the ground.
Blues by name, blues by nature. This is the punch and kick which has fractured the image of the Carlton Football Club and may well prove the final chapter in Setanta O'Halpin's check.
It was a shock incident at the time, and by the reaction of his teammates, you can see their anger. He was suspended from the club indefinitely, but was not sacked. He headed off to the tribunal and was given a 4-game ban. Just makes me wonder if he did the same action today, how much larger the penalty would be. He would go on to play 34 more games for Carlton before moving to GWS in 2012, playing for a couple more seasons.